Hey guys, hey, it's Anne Marie, and this is the Anti-HR channel. And here's a story time. You guys seem to like my story times. So before I get into my story time, I have decided to do story times more regularly. Someone in the comments made a really great suggestion that I tell you guys when I'm going to do them so that you can tune in because you guys seem to like my story times. So what I will say is if I'm going to do a story time, I will be doing them on Mondays, and I will try to schedule them ahead of time so that you know when they're going to premiere. I'll put a premiere up so you know that there's a story time coming, because I probably won't do them every week, but I will try to do them, every other week or something like that. Because apparently you guys enjoy hearing stories, tales from my many years in corporate America and the things that I've learned that inform the work that I do now. So today I'm going to tell you guys a story time relevant to why you need to have a strategy for job interviews and why you need to pay attention to what people say or don't say in job interviews and how critically important it can become. I just did a video on Friday about job interview questions that you should ask, and the importance of asking questions during the job interview process. And very soon I'm going to drop a blog post about job interview red flags. And so in preparation for that, I'm making this video about a red flag that I missed in an interview and how it became a real issue for me in my job because I did not hear the red flag at the time. So first, I also want to say I recently dropped a video inside of my anti-HR community where I spoke about strategies, not just about job interview questions and red flags. I didn't talk about red flags, but I talked about job interview strategies and things that people should do during interviews and how to answer certain kinds of questions and how to prep yourself for interviews ahead of time. And that's in my community. So if you're not a member of my community, you would not get that content, but this is a plug to join the anti-HR community because I'm going to be sharing more of that kind of content and all kinds of content inside of my community. Make sure if you are a member of the community that you join the group forum, because that's where we have these conversations. So as you join, you will get a message telling you to join the forum. Make sure you do that as well. Because if you're a member and you haven't joined the group forum, then you're kind of missing out on all of the engagement and conversations that happen in there. But I dropped a video about job interview strategies and tactics that I hope are helpful for my members. Now, story time. So I'm going to give you a little context. I'm working in a nonprofit, and you guys know I spent most of my career in the nonprofit sector. And I told you all the story about how I escaped the woman who we all call the handmaiden of the devil. And I left that job and I went and started interviewing, right? And I told you guys I landed from the day that I decided that I was leaving that job, which was 6 weeks into coming into the job. I had a new job within 8, probably less than 8. I had a new job. I came to the job in October. I decided in 6 weeks that I need to get the hell up out of there. So it was November. I started interviewing right after Thanksgiving. I had a job interview the week of Christmas Eve, and I put in my resignation that January. So less than 4 weeks, I had a new job. But I went in an interview, and it was for a director of operations position, which eventually turned into a VP position. And one of the interview questions, and I always try to be an active listener. It's a skill that I still don't think I'm that great at, but it's important. And I do try to hyper focus in interviews, but I didn't do as good a job as I could have in this one. And I'll explain how. So they were looking for someone to come in and help them with a reorganization. They were looking for someone who had experience overseeing HR and finance and other things. I had all of those things. They asked me a lot of interview questions relevant to that. But they asked me a specific question about retirement plans, I remember. And part of overseeing HR is managing retirement plans. And they asked me a question about a retirement plan. And I answered the question, and I remember the CFO looking very impressed at my answer because they asked a hypothetical question at the time. And the hypothetical question was, if you encountered this kind of thing, how would you resolve it? And I answered how I would resolve it. And for some reason, I didn't connect the dots at the time that this might be a real issue, right? And it turned out, so I accept the job, and there are other things that occurred that I'll do separate story times that told me that there was chaos in the job, right? And I told you guys about the interaction I had between the Becky and Karen that told me that there was a problem between these two women that I was going to have to navigate. But in the interview, they also asked me that question, and I didn't connect the dots until I got in there and found that it was bigger than the question they asked me about. So I came in understanding that there were some things that need to be done with the retirement plan, and I had experience doing certain things. So I knew that I was probably going to have to deal with issues relevant to the retirement plan because they asked me a question. But for some reason, I didn't connect the dots that I needed probably to spend more time focusing on it until something else came up, right? And I'm not getting into too much in depth because I try to always, be cognizant of confidentiality and not saying too much. But basically, I later found a huge problem that I was going to have to fix, right? But if I had asked a couple follow-up questions about the retirement plan in the interview, I would have been able to uncover this sooner. And it's not that I think they would have told me per se, because some of the problems I don't even think they realized existed till I got there, because there had been so much mismanagement, right? And lack of oversight. But if I had asked some questions, it would have informed my decision about not necessarily taking the job. I would have probably took the job anyway, but asking for more money, understanding how much I was going to have to deal with. Because during the interview, they kept telling me how, they had a good structure, and the person that I was, they were reorganizing, and the person that I was going to be, the responsibilities I was going to be taking over, they had everything in place, and they had a good staff person, right? And that should have been my first red flag, because they only had one HR person and an assistant for an organization that had more than 100 employees. And so that should have been a red flag as well. It wasn't because I had worked in the nonprofit arena for so long and I had seen these functions understaffed and under financed for so long that I had actually gotten used to it, right? But the reality is that an organization that has 100 plus employees should have at least 3 to 4 people in its HR department at a minimum, right? And they had 2. So they were understaffed and they were underfinanced. And I did mention the underfinancing part, and they assured me that they would be willing to give resources and so on. And they did. We built it out. But the retirement thing, I really felt in retrospect, was something that if I had spent more time listening and paying attention to not just what was asked of me, but the reaction, how pleased he was with my answer actually was, because I think that person knew how much of a problem it was. I don't think anyone else knew. And upon my arrival, that person left within 5 to 6 months of my arrival. So by the time I discovered the depth of the problem, they were long gone. So the 2 people who created the problem, one of them in HR and one of them in another department, both were gone. One was gone before I got there, and the other one was gone by the time I settled in. Within 4 to 5 months, they were gone. And so I ended up having to navigate a lot of solving that problem, completely relying on my own skills and my ability to tap other people with skills outside of the company to solve the problem, right? And it resulted in me having to spend a lot of late nights unraveling and researching and digging into things and getting into files and finding out. That's how I was able to see how far the problem and deep the problem went, right? And it took up a lot of my time. I ended up doing most of it on my own because I didn't want my new staff that I was hiring and bringing in to have to deal with it, because it was a problem that if there were errors made, they were far-reaching implications for the organization from a compliance standpoint. And I didn't want to put anyone junior to me in a position where they could be thrown under the bus or blamed for not fixing the problem correctly. So I ended up doing it personally myself because I felt like if anything got done wrong, I would be the person who would carry the responsibility. Thankfully, nothing got done wrong, right? And I had the access to a really great accountant and a really phenomenal attorney on the outside of the organization to help me make sure that I got it right. But I didn't want to place that burden on anybody else on my team. Plus primary person on my team was very busy with day-to-day things. So I dealt with it and I fixed it. But it took a lot of my time. And I spent a lot of political capital, right? As an executive, advocating for the fixes and the financing of the fixes and things that I would have preferred to have used my political capital on other things that came later. And political capital is a real thing when you're in management, and how you use it matters. So the lesson I learned was to pay closer attention, right? When you're in interviews, pay attention to how people behave, not just what they say, but the body, people react to things, bodily reactions to things, the way people look at other people, the way people behave when you're answering a question can tell you not just whether they liked how you answered the question, but it can signal that there may be more that you need to know, that maybe you need to ask a follow-up question, right? So if somebody identifies a problem, right, and they ask whether you know how to solve it, you need to ask whether that problem in fact exists in the company and what they've done so far to address it and what they believe the extent of the problem might be. You need to ask those questions, especially those of you in management positions. But even employees who are being brought in at lower non-management positions, when people ask you if you know how to do a thing, you should ask them, will I be expected to be doing this? Don't just assume it, ask the question, right? Because you don't want to come in and think you're just going to be doing day-to-day things and then find yourself knee-deep in crap that you have to spend extra time addressing that you weren't expecting. And that's what happened to me. So while I was also trying to work on a reorganization and putting together new org charts and writing new job descriptions for positions that were new and doing all these things, I also was trying to unravel a retirement plan problem. And it took up a lot of my time, right? So it's very important. Do not assume that people are going to tell you things, and do not assume, especially in the interview process, that people are going to tell you the truth, because folks will lie in your face. And a lot of times it will be lies of omission, basically lies in that they didn't tell you something they should have told you, and they implied that everything was fine, but they never out and out said everything was fine, so they can claim that they didn't actually lie to you. But they did lie by not telling you information that you needed to have to make an informed decision about whether that job was a good fit for you. So there are lots of lies of omission during the interview process because they're trying to find the best person to fix stuff for them a lot of times, and they don't want you to know the extent of the problem because you might not take the job if you knew. So you have to spend time making sure that you ask questions to get the information that you need to make informed decisions about taking a job. Because always remember, they're not just interviewing you, you should be interviewing them. And that means you need to ask important, pertinent questions that are important for you to know what you need to know to make a decision. Not just sitting there and answering their questions. Spend time also making sure that you research the company, that you understand what the company is about before you go in there. Look them up online, get on Glassdoor and look them up. Read anything that people have to say about them. I understand that most people who write things on Glassdoor are disgruntled employees. Happy employees don't always write reviews. That's just a reality. It's hard to get happy employees to write things because they're happy and they leave and they go in to do something else and they don't really feel it. So unless a company spends a lot of time and as part of the offboarding process, getting happy employees to write a review, it doesn't happen. Angry employees, disgruntled employees will always go write something, and rightly so. But you will get to find out what people have to say about a company. And if you see a common theme, you should pay attention to it. And even if it doesn't dissuade you from interviewing for the job, you should ask questions about it. Say, I researched you on Glassdoor and I saw several comments about this. Can you tell me a little bit about whether this is a problem? And pay attention to how people answer. and their bodily reaction, not just what they say, because they're going to lie to you in your face. But pay attention to what they say. And if you see a common theme and it's a serious issue, consider that a warning about whether or not that's a company you want to work for, right? But always do your homework. Always be prepared. Don't just come in there like a bug on a log. Come in there with your own questions, your own homework, so that you don't end up in a situation that you don't want to end up in. So that's my little story time about an instance in which, by not asking enough questions, I ended up having a whole lot of extra work in the first 6 months in a position, trying to fix a problem that nobody told me about. And frankly, most of them didn't even realize existed because no one had been paying attention, right? And nobody really understood the rules. And there are a lot of rules around managing retirement plans in compliance with the law. There are a lot of requirements and rules. And one of the number one rules, just for your FYI, is that the plan document, everything that a person is allowed to do or not do relevant to a retirement plan is in the plan document. So if you have not read your plan documents as employees, please do. You have access to those things, read them, know what's in there. And so anything that's relevant to how the plan is managed, how much you get, what your employer is supposed to do, how much they're supposed to put in, how they're supposed to put it in, is in the plan documents, and they're not allowed to deviate in any way from what is in there, okay? And so it's very important to read it, but most people never do. And in this particular case, people whose job it was to read it, had not read it, or read it and didn't understand it, didn't understand the parameters, right? Because it is a legal document, right? So I came in there, read it, looked at some things, realized some things were awry, and had to fix it all quickly fix it all because there were, implications and ramifications for not doing so. So I think it's important to understand how important it is to ask questions and to ask the right questions during an interview. And this was one of the times, not the only time, but one of the times where I had to do extra work when I came into a job because I had not asked the right questions. And because asking the right questions would allow me to factor into whether or not only was I going to accept, but accept it at what they were going to pay me. I probably could have gotten more money out of them just off of that problem if I had asked some more questions, right? So it's really important to pay attention in job interviews to what people ask you and to try to ascertain ahead of time whether the reason they're asking you a question is because they're setting you up for some extra work, extra problems, etc. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope you enjoyed it. You can let me know in the comments whether you've had any similar issues in terms of accepting a job and then finding out after the fact that it was not all it was cracked up to be in the interview process, and that there was real additional work that you were going to have to do because you didn't ask questions in the interview and they didn't disclose. They did not fully disclose or even at all disclose the problem ahead of time. Hope you learned something in this story time. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, HR is not your enemy, but they're definitely not your friend, but I am. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.